Hey guys, it's Jordan here with Koda's Canine Academy, and the video that I'm going to do today is a little bit different than any of the other ones that I've done, and it's not even training based actually, but it was actually on the topic of at-home euthanasia because I've had people ask me about it since Koda's passing, and before I went with that option, I had actually found a video on YouTube of a guy that shared his experience with at home euthanasia, and it actually helped me a lot to be prepared and know what to expect when the time came. So I thought I might do, I thought I could do a video like that just to kind of share my experience and kind of how it all happened. So, for those of you that don't know how Koda died, um, he had osteosarcoma, which is the most aggressive form of bone cancer that dogs can have. Usually, by the time it is diagnosed, or like it has progressed to the point that it's diagnosable, um, dogs are dead within like 3 months. Okay. If they catch it early, depending on where it's at, if amputation is possible, and if it hasn't metastasized somewhere else, obviously that can get pushed out a little bit more, like 6 months. Very few dogs live for years after experience osteosarcoma. And if you're super unlucky, like me, and the first place that it showed up was on his rib cage, there's a very high likelihood that it can metastasize to the lungs, which in Koda's case it did. So some of the warning signs for him was that he had extremely decreased ability to exercise. Um, he, I'm sorry, it's kind of difficult to talk about. I guess you guys don't really need to know the symptoms, but anyways, he, by the time we found out that he had it, and like it was confirmed it was already in his lungs, I was about to have him in surgery the following week, and I asked them to do additional testing because I knew that if I was going to spend that much money on a surgery, I wanted to know if it had already metastasized somewhere else, because if they hadn't done all of those x-rays and stuff and seen it in those other places, he might have died on the table. So I'm really glad that I did do that, and that I chose not to go through with the surgery. But long story short, I started planning then. You know, a lot of people have asked me like, how did you know? And the truth is I didn't. I didn't really know either. It was kind of one of those things where it was like a waiting game, but I did immediately start calling and looking for a vet that would offer at-home euthanasia, because a lot of vets that offer at-home euthanasia, it doesn't you don't have to necessarily set an exact date, but like they want to know that it's coming and like kind of like a heads up. So, in my situation, I got really lucky. The vet that I found, she was like the most like down to earth person. She was like a large veterinarian, or a large animal veterinarian. So she did a lot of like farm calls, put down a lot of like big animals. Um, And so she pretty much told me, she's like, give me like a couple days like advance, if you can, She's like, obviously I understand that these things are up and down, but give me like a little time in advance if you can. And I was like, sure thing. So it was a really good thing that I already had those arrangements made. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult, especially if you're in a rural area where there isn't a lot of access to that sort of stuff. You want to make sure that you plan it ahead of time, because I know for me, as I watched Coda decline and get sicker and sicker and whatever, was it was so stressful thinking about how, not only when do you make the decision, but how do you make it the absolute most comfortable for him that you can, you know? So I didn't want to be additionally stress out about that leading up to that because I didn't want him to feel that, you know. But anyways, um another thing that you're going to want to do is if it's a situation like mine where the vet isn't taking them with you, um, I would highly recommend reaching, unless you plan on burying them on your property, which, you know, that's fine. This is for people who like want to go the cremation option or something like that, okay? Um, so you would want to reach out to like a okay, you would want to reach out to like a local funeral home or something like that. Again, in advance. A lot of them do have like weekend or after hours services. So, again, with the funeral home that I worked with, they were like, hey, we appreciate the heads up. Like, let us know when it's whatever, and you know, we'll come pick them up. And the funeral home I worked with was wonderful. I mean, they got there a little earlier than I necessarily anticipated, but they were right there and they were very kind and they gave us our space while we finished everything. And then, you know, obviously they took him. But having that set up as well, again, took a lot of stress off because then, like, when it did come time to make that decision, my boyfriend like called for me, but since it was already set up, he's just like, hey, like, this is what time the vet's coming. Like, if you come here at this time and you know, whatever. It made it so much easier the day of. So I would highly, highly recommend having those things in mind, right? And kind of taking that planning out of the equation so that when it does come down to the last couple days that you have with them, you can spend that time with them and focus on them and not focused on that aspect of it, okay? Um so I had called her, given her a couple days heads up, and then Um, he definitely the hard part with Koda and what will make it hard for a lot of people, and I know this, is trying to decide when, right? When is the right time to do that, to make that decision? And I'm telling you, no matter when, no matter when you decide, it's gonna feel wrong and it's gonna hurt and you're gonna hate yourself for it. You are. And that's something that nobody prepares you for. But for me, it was about him the whole time. And Koda was, gosh, he was just a magnificent creature. He loved to be outside, he loved to play, he loved to like spend time with us and with the kids and with the other dogs. Like he was so full of life all the time. And to see him spend days at a time not being able to get off the floor, like not being able to get up to get a drink or to walk outside to go to the bathroom. I mean, you know, like we would pick him up and carry him outside and hold him up. He couldn't even stand up. And when I first saw that there was, um, after Kodo progressed a little bit, he had masses popping up everywhere. He had them in his neck, kind of along his spine. They were just getting bigger and bigger, and obviously we knew they were in his lungs as well. So he eventually ended up with some nerve issues, um, and his foot, it's called knuckling, where they can't feel that their foot is upside down, so they don't walk right, and they're just not walking on the top of their feet. And um, what was crazy is like he would try to fight through it because he was just like the strongest guy, but his knuckles were just getting destroyed. And to see a dog that when it got to the point, this is what I started doing. This is the best advice that I can give to anybody who is in a situation like that. For me, because it has always been about the quality of life for my dog, when Coda started having more bad days than good, that was when I knew. He didn't want to go outside anymore. He didn't want to hang out. He just wanted his space. You could tell that he was in pain all the time. Um, he just, he wasn't himself anymore. And it's not like a dog that's like getting older and like losing their energy and stuff. You could tell that Koda was, it was because he was in pain. That like physically, like he could not do it. Like he couldn't. And I could see it in his eyes and his attitude and everything. He was miserable. And selfishly, as his mom and somebody that has raised him since he was 4 weeks old, like I wanted him there. I wanted him there longer with me, and but I just couldn't. I couldn't stand to see him so miserable and not able to live his life. And I remember one night, the night that I decided it was time, he was laying on my bed and he was in so much pain. He was like having trouble like breathing. He was just laying on his side. He wouldn't pick his head up. And the only thing that would calm him down was if I laid with him and held his paw and just rubbed him and talked to him. And I got up to go to the bathroom and he immediately panicked. He immediately panicked. He started breathing so hard and he's looking for me all over the place. I just went to the bathroom and came back, and as soon as I laid back down with him, he caught his breath and he relaxed and whatever. And I realized that Koda not being able to be himself and like not follow me and like do what he always does, which is protect his family and protect his people, like that was killing him. That was killing him on the inside. And it's not it. If I could have strapped Koda to my chest and carried him around for another couple weeks, I might have, who knows. But he was so miserable. And that was the night that I decided, like, he does not deserve that. And he was already on so many pain pills. Just if he wasn't so in so much pain that he couldn't move, he was high as a kite. And he wasn't there either. That wasn't Koda either. And so my advice to you is that when your dog is incapable of being themselves and they are incapable of enjoying their life or any of the things that they love or make them happy, like that's normally when a dog would crawl off and die. If it was a wild dog, if they didn't have you, they would have found a place to curl up and die. And like, don't do that to them. Don't force them to stay alive or so high that they can't function just because you don't want to say goodbye. That's my advice. Let them go out while they can still at least enjoy something. With Koda, we spent his last 2 days, we carried him to the baseball game with us. He sat at the softball game with us. He had got to watch the kids play and run around, and they had so much fun. And we took him to the creek. We got him his favorite treats. We did everything. And granted, he was completely crippled from it. Then it started what would have been another like spree of a bunch of really bad days for him. But he got to go out feeling like himself. He got to go out feeling like the incredible companion that he always was. And that was something that I was grateful I was able to give him, even if it meant carrying 100 and so pound dog, you know, 150 yards up a hill and across railroad tracks, like worth it every time, you know. But when the vet got there, she pretty much what happens. The first thing, I mean, the first thing that they give him, it's usually a series of 2 injections when they do it. The first one, I don't know how all dogs respond to that injection, but I know Koda did not respond well. that was not something I was anticipating. Um, I think out of naivety, I was hoping that they didn't feel it at all. But, and she had tried to warn me that it might hurt a little bit. Maybe Koda's just a big baby, but anyways, that his reaction to that first one was more intense than I expected, and I was glad that um, I was right there with him because I was able to comfort him. And then he fell asleep right there in my arms. Um, and that's what the first injection does. It like knocks him out essentially. It's a very, very, very strong painkiller. Knocks them right out. Not kills them, obviously, just they pass out. And then she asked me like where I wanted to do it at. And I wanted the boys, I wanted Hershey and Bruce to be able to see. If you're somebody with other dogs in the house, um, this is something I would also recommend to you. Dogs are animals, they understand death. Um, they understand what it means more than what we give them credit for. And I can tell you that me allowing them to see it and allowing to say goodbye to him in that, I think helped a lot. But my boyfriend carried him outside and we laid him underneath this giant oak tree where he always used to sit and like watch the boys play or watch the kids play or just watch over us in general. It was like his perch. So we went out there and I left the glass door open so that Hershey and Bruce could watch. And then she gave the second injection, and there isn't much difference um, in their state between the two, um, other than that they stopped breathing after the second one. And then I allowed the boys to come out. And one thing that was very shocking to me was the way that the boys responded. I guess I wasn't really sure what to expect. Um, and that's something that nobody talks about either. Like, nobody prepares you for how, like, your other dogs will respond to that, you know? But, Bruce walked up and he just barely sniffed, like, his mouth. Like, I think he was checking to see if he was breathing, which was incredible to me because it happened quick. Sorry about that. But anyways, so Bruce came up, checked him, and then backed away. Did not. That was all he needed. Hershey, he also didn't want anything to do with me. He just went back about 10 feet and he stood there like a statue and waited until the whole process was over, but he just stood there. I've never seen Bruce do that before. And Hershey, you could tell, like, emotionally he was not okay. Like, when he figured out what was going on, he immediately like was like coming to me like, "Mom, like what's going on? Like, what's happening? Like, I don't understand." And like Hershey definitely had I guess more of the reaction I was expecting, but um he definitely was very aware of what happened, you know. And then, like I said, the funeral home had got there about the time that we were bringing him outside, and they stayed back and they let me say my goodbyes, and then they took him, and that was it. That was pretty much it. And honest to goodness, I think the whole process, 15 to 20 minutes maybe. I had taken my time before that to say my goodbyes, and that's something else that I would highly recommend, because I think with an at-home euthanasia, like, you kind of, it could be very easy to not let them go or not want to let them go. I know for me, I could have laid there and cried with him for hours, you know? And I didn't want to say my goodbyes then or in front of anybody else. So that's another thing that I would highly recommend, is that you take that time before anybody comes and you say what you have to say, because I think it's important that you have the opportunity to do that while they can still hear you and they can still see you and they can still feel you, and also while they're so comfortable. Because I can tell you, like, Koda knew. Sorry, y'all. I saved this part for last because I knew it would be the hardest to talk about, but yeah. So, all right. So, last thing, but just something that I would like to kind of share with you guys about this experience was my dog's reaction after. Okay, like, one thing I mean, I always knew the dogs are, like, emotional, whether people want to admit it or not, but I've never seen a dog cry before, and I've also never seen a dog so lost before. And I can tell you, like, when Koda died, the relationship between my dogs changed a lot. Koda was very much like the gang leader, you know, like, he initiated a lot of play between the two of them. He established, I mean, he ruled everything, and I didn't realize it at the time. I mean, I knew how much he did, but when he wasn't there anymore, I didn't realize how much of an impact he had on the boys on a day-to-day basis, and how much he really, like, guided them and, like, showed them the way. And with Bruce, it was like he was lost without Koda. Hershey, not as much, because he defaults to me a lot, but Bruce was lost. He didn't want to go outside. He tried to avoid the front yard where Koda passed. He didn't, yeah, he wouldn't stick his head out the window in the car anymore, because that was something that him and Koda always did together. He wouldn't do it for weeks. For the first couple days, every morning he would get up and he would immediately come out and he would search the whole house for him. And then when he couldn't find him, he would just lay down on his bed and, like, look sad. Hershey, Hershey surprised me. Like, he actually cried. I remember the day after, I was sitting on the couch, and, like, the one blanket that Koda laid on a lot was laying there, and I was just sitting there, and I was crying, and Hershey came up and he climbed on the couch beside me where that blanket was at, and he buried his face all in the blanket, and he was like, and he had I've never seen Hershey bury his face in a blanket before, ever in my life. He does not like to have his face, he doesn't really like to be covered up with, like, blankets and stuff like that. He doesn't like his face to be covered. So for him to, like, bury his face in it like that, and then to, like, quite actually cry, like, it rocked me. And I realized that, like, my dogs needed me more now than ever. And it was crazy because I guess in my selfish way of thinking, I kind of expected them to be my rocks. And I didn't consider the fact that like they had just lost like their dad essentially, because that's what Koda was to both of them. I mean, he taught them so many things about everything, and like they were both rocked by it. And so what I want to say is if you have other dogs in the home and like maybe you have that one dog that you know is the pack leader and whatever, anticipate some changes in your dog's behavior and realize like they need you and they need your love too, because like what that dog meant to you meant to them maybe even more, even if you didn't realize it. And I know me and my dogs leaning on each other during that time made it a lot easier. So just kind of something to keep in mind, and hopefully this was helpful for somebody. And if you have any questions or like, you know, if you're somebody who's considering it and, you know, you're not sure, you're welcome to join the chat and I'm happy to talk about it with you. Thanks, guys.